Corruption, waste, and mismanagement in Iraq have cost U.S. taxpayers billions of dollars. And now, incredibly, Congress is firing the auditor who has exposed some of the worst examples of fraud in Iraq.
That has some lawmakers saying, not so fast. Coming up, why some in Washington want a powerful inspector out of a job in Iraq. Now to a story about waste and fraud in Iraq and a Republican lawyer who exposed some of the wrongdoings by American companies and officials. It was 2 weeks ago that Stuart Bowen and his office was ordered shut down. It was a move that came in a clause, not seen by many, inside a budget bill. Many lawmakers say they had no idea it was there. Democratic Congressman Rob Andrews, a ranking member of the House Armed Services Committee, joins us now. Were you involved in those negotiations? Some of the accounts say that the Republicans wanted to put this in, and there was a debate with the Democrats over it. Others say they had no idea where this even came from.
There was a last-minute, middle-of-the-night argument between the staff on the Republican side and the staff on the Democratic side. This was snuck into the bill in the middle of the night. It is an outrage. The auditing office should be left open. And frankly, when we go back to Washington, whether it's the Republicans or Democrats in charge, we're going to insist that this auditing office be kept open.
How much money is thought to have gone missing in Iraq? Some say there's $9 billion in oil for food money that really belonged to the Iraqis that U.S. taxpayers may have to pay back. In the meantime, the U.S. taxpayers pumped in hundreds of millions of dollars to Iraq.
Jim, the answer is we don't know. And that's why we need an auditor. And the gentleman who's there has done an exemplary job.
And he's a Republican.
Republican and Democrat doesn't matter here. He's done an exemplary job, and I salute him. And the very idea that at a time there's been so much graft, so much fraud, and so much waste, that this would be shut down in the middle of the night with a provision snuck into the bill at the last minute shows you why I think the American people on Tuesday are going to make a wholesale change in the United States Congress and switch control from the Republicans to the Democrats.
Yeah, and I want to note here, Congressman Andrews, you are running for office, but you're running unopposed. So you're not here to beat one of your, opponents here in order to get elected by bringing up these charges about the corruption and...
No, that's right.
I'm very humbled. Aside from that.
Yeah, I'm very humbled by the fact that I do not have an opponent in my race, but I'm outraged by the fact that this lawyer who's doing such a good job in Iraq is going to have his operation shut down because evidently somebody in Washington wants to shut him down. We are just not going to let that happen.
All right. More on that in a moment. Let me ask you something. Did the Democrats then, did you vote for this bill?
I did, because it had a pay raise for the troops, it had material for the field, and frankly, no one had a clue or any inclination that this offensive provision was in there.
Right now, there's another politically charged skirmish going on stemming from the war. It's got Democrats and Republicans pointing fingers. It's apparently costing a special U.S. government investigator his job. Let's bring in our congressional correspondent, Andrea Koppel. Andrea?
Wolf, the special investigator for Iraq reconstruction is considered one of the most feared men in Washington. With the flick of the pen, he has sent some to prison and others have had to pay huge fines. And if his mandate isn't extended further, his job will end next October.
It was a shocking revelation. Hundreds of thousands of small arms provided to Iraq's army and police forces unaccounted for. The revelation made just this week in a report by the Special Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction.
We don't make any assumptions about where these weapons are in our audit. We just identify where the material weaknesses are.
Since January 2004, Stuart Bowen has led efforts to uncover waste, abuse, and fraud in Iraq. But due to a provision in a recent bill to fund the U.S. military, Bowen and his team will have to shut down operations next year. Democrats claim Republicans pulled a fast one.
We need to have that auditor operating. It is an outrage that this was taken out by a provision put into the bill in the middle of the night. It is also very typical of the culture of corruption that we've seen in Washington, D.C.
But Republican Duncan Hunter, who was involved in the negotiations, says that's just not true.
So if you look at the signature block on this, this is the signatures of the Democrats. in the Senate and the House who signed off on that, and they all agreed we have to have a date certain. So this wasn't there was no controversy over this. We said, okay, that's a year from now. We have the IG's office gets to work another year.
In fact, a Democratic congressional source confirms that key Democrats were on board, telling CNN, quote, "This was not a final nail in the coffin that could not be undone."
Now, listen to this. Congress is going to shut down the federal agency that reports on fraud and waste in Iraq. Congress is going to close the federal agency that reports on fraud and waste in Iraq. New York Times reports this was part of a military authorization bill that President Bush recently signed. Led by a Republican lawyer, this Office of the Special Inspector General for Iraq Reconstruction has filed more than 300 reports and investigations. They've exposed everything from poor construction work by companies like Halliburton and Bechtel to the thousands of missing U.S. weapons that were meant for Iraqi security forces. This is all stuff that's pretty damaging to what the administration is trying to accomplish in Iraq. So what happened? Well, the Republicans on the House Armed Services Committee added this provision to shut this office down into a bill during a closed-door conference. Lawmakers in both parties now say that they're worried about the loss of oversight and are going to work to reverse the decision. Hold your breath on that. Meanwhile, a committee spokesman says this all has nothing to do with politics or the White House or lobbying by the big contractors like Halliburton and Bechtel. He says the idea is to return to a non-wartime footing and to let the State Department and the Pentagon investigate overseas programs. Now, there's a great idea. A non-wartime footing, really? Are we there yet? It's only November 3rd. 11 U.S. soldiers have been killed in Iraq so far this month, and that follows October, which was the fourth bloodiest month for the American military there, when 105 of our soldiers died. That's some non-wartime footing, isn't it? Here's the question. Why would Congress shut down the office that's reporting on fraud and waste in Iraq?
They've really brought to light a lot of the waste, fraud, abuse, billions and billions of dollars. They've really done a pretty good job.
And it's headed up by a Republican lawyer who's doing what they asked him to do. And it's like, well, we got to go to a non-wartime footing now.
Stuart Bowen, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
We'll stay on top of this story, see what our viewers think as well.
I already know. Ronald in Phoenix. Jack, the Republican Congress starting to circle the wagons before Democrats have the subpoena powers to look at Halliburton at all. David in Dayton, Ohio, they believe that they are above the law and there's nothing we can do about it. Hopefully, after November 7th, that will all change. Seth in Bothell, Washington, it happened because those that made the decision are so deeply complicit in the fraud and waste that they fear the legal and political backlash. When this is all eventually out in the open, I'm guessing we'll find some guilty of war profiteering, theft, and probably treason in the name of filling deep pockets with the blood of our soldiers. Mary in Yorktown, Virginia, Congress shut down the oversight office. Now we're shutting them down. No more business as usual. Nick in Florida, they probably think it's a waste of money. And Daniel in Newport Richey, Florida, Jack, for the same reason they would boot you off CNN if they could, so nobody can hear all the bad news.
News about the auditor's dismissal comes one day after a huge contractor said it is pulling out of Iraq. Bechtel has completed nearly 100 projects at a cost to U.S. taxpayers of more than $2 billion. 52 Bechtel workers were killed.
The violence continues across this country, and specifically these infrastructure projects are being targeted. Bechtel was unable to complete a hospital in Basra. It got delayed by a year. It was 150% over budget. Eventually, the U.S. military took them off of the job because they just couldn't get it done. In other areas, we're seeing security affecting the quality of construction as well, and that also dovetails in, pairs together, Wolf, with this idea that some of these American contractors are subcontracting to the point where the work gets very shoddy as well. Remember what happened to that police college where all of the plumbing was leaking. So, Wolf, a lot of problems here, but overhanging everything is this issue of security. And we should mention to you, Wolf, too, before we go here, things still very dangerous in Baghdad. Just got a report of 3 more soldiers killed in eastern Baghdad. That would bring now to 7 the total number of U.S. troops killed in the first 2 days of November.
A United Nations committee has approved a resolution that could pave the way for a treaty restricting the sale of small arms worldwide. 139 countries voted yes. only the United States voted no. More arms are manufactured in the U.S. than in any other country.